If your tiny little toddler at any moment decides to offer you a dino nugget, don't take it, okay? That thing probably was already in his mouth. It was maybe on the ground for a few seconds. It has dust particles. It has all kind of nonsense on it. Do yourself a favor, just walk away. Just thank him for the offer, but tell him you're good. On a side note, dino nuggets are definitely not as good as they used to be when I was a kid. I remember biting into those juicy nuggets and absolutely loving them. Now, I'm not even sure if they're made of chicken. What are they even made out of? They taste absolutely disgusting. Don't even bring any dino nuggets near me. Anyways, all jokes aside, let's get straight into it. I actually wanted to talk about a brand new Yamaguchi Revoltech action figure that just got announced, I think earlier today, or at least that's the first time that I'm hearing about it. We're looking at the Symbiote Spider-Man from Revoltech, and I feel like I've definitely been doing a better job of covering way more action figure lines on the channel. Back in the day, like maybe 4 to 5 months ago, I really didn't talk too much about Revoltech, or I would talk about them in passing, but I've done I think a much better job of covering this particular line, even though it's an imported line and it's definitely way more expensive than the action figures that I usually talk about. But still, I thought that I would showcase a little bit of love to this particular manufacturer. I actually have owned a couple of Revoltechs back in the day, and I have to say, I love the line. It is a little bit too expensive for my style, so I don't usually purchase too many of them, but I love the articulation scheme. I love the intricate poses that you can get these figures in. They're very dynamic. I would like to say that if you like comic book poses for your action figures, the Revoltech line is absolutely perfect for you, because sometimes your Marvel Legends action figures or your DC Multiverse or whatever line you're into that is on the lower end of the spectrum usually can get into those crazy intricate poses. If you're looking to recreate comic book poses, like have the figure essentially coming right out of the comic book, I think this is the perfect manufacturer for you. There are times when the figure looks a little bit disjointed and a little bit gappy, but if that doesn't really bother you, I think this is just an absolutely phenomenal manufacturer overall. Now, this particular figure, and I think they've been doing this now for, I think, like the last 3 to 4 different releases from Revoltech. They're doing a phenomenal job of making the articulation scheme a little bit more seamless, and they're hiding the joints a little bit better. Still not compared to like a lot of the modern day collectibles that we're used to, like Marvel Legends, whoever else owns like SH, for example, Mafex, Mesco. They do a pretty good job of hiding most of the articulation points, or they're not like way out there. They're not extremely gappy. There are cuts, but it's usually what you would expect from an action figure line. Whereas in Revoltech back in the day, the joints, some of the ball joints were just popping out, and it made the figure look really ugly. And they just weren't figures that you wanted to take too much pictures of. It was mostly just if you wanted those crazy dynamic poses. In this particular case, and I should say for the last few releases, they've been doing a great job of re-engineering the body molds. These aren't like 2.0s or 1.5s. This is like a brand new action figure. From what I can tell, this is a brand new body mold for the most part, and unless they have used it before, but it is one of the newer body molds. And I can definitely feel it, because when the figure's actually articulated, it's doing a slightly better job of hiding those ball joints and those hideous gappy joints, which back in the day, they really didn't care for. They were just out there, and I think they're doing a much better job to kind of balance out the figure. And I feel like they're mostly doing that not to appeal to the consumer base that has been supporting them this entire time, but I think they're doing it to expand their fan base, to get other people interested, people that maybe were not into the way that the figure articulated before, and maybe they didn't like the joints. This is a new way of trying to reel in a new consumer base, a new fan base, to really bring people into their action figure line. And I think, honestly, it's the correct move. Even though it didn't really bother me, I know there are a lot of collectors out there that had a lot of problems with the older Revoltech action figures. Now, the figure will come with all of the extra alternate hands that you could need. The web shooting hands, web crawling hands, fisted hands. It will also come with a plethora of different web shooting effects, an action figure stand, and then an extra head sculpt. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the extra alternate head sculpt would only be obtainable if you actually order directly from the Kyoto shop. If you use one of these third-party retailers or one of these like US websites, you would not be able to get the extra head sculpt. So it's kind of like a little added bonus. If you want to buy directly, they're going to throw in the extra head sculpt. But as I mentioned prior, the promotional images really showcase the figure's full potential. Now, personally, I love the color tone that they're using for this figure. It's shiny, but it's dulled out at the same time. I don't know if that makes any sense. I also love the texturing all around. It really feels like there's a symbiote on top of the Spider-Man suit. Sometimes when you get a symbiote Spider-Man action figure, it's just like a Spider-Man action figure colored in black. Here, it definitely feels like there's like a living organism scattered all across the suit, and I think that definitely is going to help the figure come to life a little bit more, especially when it's in some of these dynamic poses. Having said that, there are some minor nitpicks that I noticed when it came down to this figure, and most of it has to do with the proportions. Like the limbs, for some reason, like the thighs, for example, are a little bit too thick. I'm not sure if they're basing it on like a very specific comic book art or like a series of some kind, but from what I could see, it just doesn't seem very proportionate. It feels like the thighs are a little bit too big, and I think a part of the like the upper biceps maybe are a little bit too thick. And I don't know, it kind of distracts a little bit from the figure. I felt like if they could have made the figure a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, if they would have balanced out the different limbs and just the body overall and the mass of the figure, I think it would have just looked better. It would have displayed much better. But unfortunately here, I think it's a giant roadblock that it's going to run into eventually. I'm a little bit frustrated with the figure. That's really my only nitpick from what I could see. I also would have preferred more tendril accessories that could have been ported on to the figure in, you know, different parts of the body, rather than having some of those weird web splatter effect pieces. It's kind of similar to what Hasbro did a few years ago, where they just started adding like web splat that you couldn't really use. I mean, I might have used it like in a couple of poses here and there for some of my videos, but overall those web splatter effect pieces just hold very little value to me. Personally, I would just 100% much rather have web effect pieces where I can recreate the Spider-Man figure shooting the web out of his hand or web swinging through the city. Those are the two type of effect pieces, or web effect pieces, that I personally would prefer. The web splatters don't do anything for me, and then I feel like you get some really good effect pieces with the tendrils, but I feel like they kind of shortened it out a little bit there. Again, take away the web splatters, just give me a couple of those web shooting effect pieces, and then add a bunch of tendrils all over the action figure. I don't know if that's necessarily too accurate to like his first appearance. I can't quite remember if he did have a bunch of tendrils popping out from his body, but I think would have been really cool maybe to add some tendrils maybe coming out from the thighs or the legs, or maybe some coming out around his neck. We have seen a lot of different manufacturers do that, where it's like unmasked head sculpt, and then you have some like symbiotic effect pieces that can be ported on around the head. But the tendrils that are included with the figure do look absolutely amazing. I think they do add a lot to the figure. On a side note, even though I did bash the little web splatter effect pieces, they actually did showcase a couple of images where Spider-Man is essentially shooting the web splatter onto another character. I'm assuming another action figure, just like a blank action figure. All they wanted to do was, again, showcase the splatters and how they could be used. And it is pretty cool. I like the way that they're being utilized here. I think they will have their uses when you're actually posing your figure or photographing it or just throwing it up on your collection. I do feel like they're very useful and they will help out. But at the end of the day, just in my personal opinion, I would have preferred the tendrils, or, you know, maybe a couple of other web swinging effect pieces. But that's just me. That's my personal opinion. This is a figure that I am actually genuinely excited for. I have seen a lot of people talking about like the Mess Toys action figure. That I think they also did, well, it's either CT Toys or the Mess Toys. I think both of them have done the symbiotic Spider-Man action figure. So I'm kind of curious to see whether those are worth picking up. I might circle back around and maybe purchase one just for the sake of curiosity. I have seen they're going for about like mid-20s for like $24, $25 to $30, which honestly isn't that bad. Now, I did check before the huge giant tariff increase, so they might be a little bit more expensive, but I'm just starting to really like these imported figures, even if they are technically knockoffs or they're not officially licensed by Marvel. They still look absolutely amazing, and I'm definitely going to have to try some of these out in the foreseeable future. I'll probably start out with the mesh toys, but this is definitely one of those that I'm going to keep my eye on. If you guys are interested in this particular figure at retail, it's going to be about like $80 US. I'm not sure if that's, I'm assuming that's not including shipping. If you go through like some of the other websites, I'm going to assume that it's a little bit over 100 or, you know, low 100s around that particular price point. So it's definitely a very expensive figure, but I have to say with Revoltech, especially the new Revoltech action figures, I feel like you're 100% getting your money's worth. This thing looks absolutely phenomenal, and I think this line is one of those few lines over the past like few months that I think is actually getting better. They're taking steps forwards, and some of the improvements are very minor. You wouldn't be able to really tell from afar, or if you don't really collect the action figure line. But I think as time has gone by, they're doing these minor little tweaks, and they're actually making their action figures, they're making them look better while still being able to articulate just as well as they were, like, you know, at the beginning. So I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say. Let me know your thoughts down below. Do you guys plan on picking up this figure? Are you skipping it? Is there something that you didn't like? What are your nitpicks? I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, if you guys enjoy this type of content, make sure to stay tuned. We're uploading on a daily basis, and we absolutely love it. Stay safe out there, enjoy your hobby, pose your action figures, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.